Hi everyone, it's Laura with the Mila Project. Today we're doing our second legal webcast focusing on civil rights and what to do if your civil rights are violated. Today's webcast is sponsored by Linguatica. Please visit them at linguatica.com and show your support. Today, attorney Jeffrey Heil is joining us. Jeffrey is an attorney in civil rights practicing in Connecticut and New York. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Laura, for having me. Appreciate it.
No problem. Today I have some questions I'm going to ask you, and hopefully we will be able to inform our audience about what to do if their civil rights are violated and what they are. And I'm just going to go right into this. So here we go.
Okay.
In the United States, I understand that civil rights laws protect us against discrimination. Can you please tell us what our civil rights are and where they originated from?
Sure, Laura. Well, the origins of civil rights in the United States actually come from English roots, and earlier than that from Roman roots. More contemporary application, our civil rights come from our Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. To various civil rights statutes. I guess the most common and well-known is the 1964 Civil Rights Act. I believe it was enacted July 2nd in 1964. And that changed the course of history for our country and really leveled the playing field for a lot of folks that had been previously discriminated against and disadvantaged and left out of the American dream, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us what are civil rights? What is it?
I guess civil rights, from a textbook definition, the First Amendment, I guess, speaks of freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. And the First Amendment, the relevant portion of the First Amendment says that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the exercise thereof. And I think that's a good example of what civil rights are. We're free to practice in the United States religion as we see fit, and the government should not intrude on those rights. And very different than a lot of other countries in the world in which religious freedoms are not guaranteed, and in fact you can be persecuted, for your religious beliefs.
Can I ask you specifically, is race protected by the civil rights, or national origin, gender, are those protected under the civil rights?
Yeah, they are. I guess just to briefly outline some of the major civil rights provisions in the 1964 Act that are pertinent to your question. For example, Title II says that outlaw discrimination based on race, color, religion, or national origin in hotels, motels, restaurants, theaters, and all other public accommodations that touch on interstate commerce. And what that means is when the 1964 Civil Rights Act was enacted and contemplated before that, the government had a very strong interest in trying to level the playing field and move away from segregation, in which the separate but equal laws were in place in the 1950s and early 60s. And most of the laws involved African Americans, and they were trying to correct the past wrongs stemming from slavery, and then the separate but equal doctrine, in which African Americans were not given equal access to education, to public accommodations, as I mentioned, and the '64 Rights Act was created to try to correct those prior wrongs.
Okay. So can you tell me, is it only United States citizens that have protection of civil rights? I mean, what if you're an immigrant, or what if you are an undocumented alien? Who's protected?
That's a very good question, a very controversial question. I think there's a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty when you hear that question. The way the courts have ruled in the past and what is current law is that everyone within the borders of the United States has equal protection under the law. Okay, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution spells that out. So whatever classification you're in, whether you're here legally, you're a documented alien, or you're here illegally, you're undocumented, no matter what background you come from or ethnicity, you are covered in most instances by the protections of the Constitution, the guarantees under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
Okay.
With a few exceptions.
Okay. So before I go to the next one, I just want to reiterate that if you are an undocumented alien, if you are an immigrant, if you are a citizen, it doesn't matter what you are. If you are in the borders of America, you are protected under the civil rights, and you can stand up and speak out if your civil rights are being violated.
Yes, under the Equal Protection Amendment, you have the rights that any citizen has. The rights that you might not have under the Constitution if you're undocumented or not a citizen of the United States. You don't have an automatic right to bear arms. You don't have a right to vote, and there are some other minor exceptions as well. But predominantly, you have a right to be treated in a fair and consistent manner as any citizen would in the U.S.
Okay. And just to touch a little bit more on this, I extended an invitation to the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay.
And I asked them if they would do a webcast with us and talk about the security of the victims. So if you are an undocumented alien, out of status, or whatever the issue may be, that you are still protected. You will not be deported, you will not be arrested, or you won't have any trouble because of your status if you're a victim. So I will keep you posted on when that webcast is going to happen, but I feel very confident that it will. So that's important information too. The next question that I want to ask that is not on our list here is, you know, who can violate somebody's civil rights? Like, if I walked over to somebody and said, no, you can't have this crayon because you're a woman, I just violated her civil rights? Or does it have to be from somebody who's in a position of power, government, employer? How does that work? Like, can an individual violate another individual's civil rights, and can that individual be held accountable, or does it have to be somebody in a powerful position?
Well, I think it's not necessarily a power position. There's two different classes in the United States. There's the private class, and then there's the government class. And the Constitution protects people, and the civil rights legislation protects people predominantly from acts of the government. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, they create protections under the law so the government does not persecute, prosecute people unfairly without due process. And in the private sector, if you're a private citizen, there are state and federal statutes, depending on the state. We'll get into that a little bit, that govern hate speech and hate crimes. So if you engage in anti-Semitic crimes or crimes against anyone because of their race or their ethnicity or religious background, what have you, there are certain criminal penalties that can be assessed against you as an individual if you engage in that type of behavior. But again, it depends on the state, and the federal government does have some legislation out there to protect people from hate crimes. But a lot of it has to do with state law, and you have to look at your specific state that you live in to see what the regulations are.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about if our gay, lesbian, transgender community have civil rights protection? And if so, how are they protected under the civil rights?
Yeah, that's an interesting question too. Very controversial and politically divisive issue. Right now, my understanding is, and again, this can change in a moment's notice with the state, with their legislature, but generally speaking, there are anti-hate crime bills and legislation that's out there that protects people throughout the United States from different types of hate crimes. 24 of the states have provisions within these hate crime bills that protect people from discrimination because of their sexual orientation. Okay, I believe it's, looking at my statistics here, 19 states have legislation that currently protect people from discrimination based on sexual orientation. Okay, but right now there is no specific federal law or protected category involving sexual orientation protections. There are only anti-hate crime laws on the books on the federal level, but nothing specific to that protects freedom from discrimination with sexual orientation. It's a little confusing, but you've got to look at the state law and you've got to look at the federal law, and that's always in a constant state of flux when it comes to civil rights, as it should be. We need to constantly look at our laws and look for ways to improve them and bring them up to meet contemporary needs in society.
Well, it sounds like we need to look into this, because 19 states, I mean, that's not very many states that offer civil rights for this group, this community.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and there's a lot of controversy, whether or not we should protect people's, we talk about gay marriage and civil unions. There's a lot of different aspects of sexual orientation, different protections that have been deliberated, and some that are protected. Some municipalities, actually, I think San Francisco and New York City, to name two, have also specific regulations and ordinances against any type of discrimination based on sexual orientation. I'm not intimate with the details, but that's my general knowledge on the area.
Okay. So. We have to move on to the next questions because we're going to keep this under a certain time. But this one is important to me. So I would like to know if discrimination can come from the law enforcement and or our legal system, including the U.S. courts. And if it does, what can somebody do to protect themselves?
Well, I think discrimination can happen anywhere at any time. You don't need to be in a protected category to be discriminated against, or a lot of people in protected categories actually due to discrimination. Discrimination happens at home. It happens in schools with all the bullying that's going on, and we've seen the very tragic results of what happens when you bully and you ostracize and stereotype people. Especially with our youth. They bring guns into schools and they lash out at the people that were bullying them, and people end up getting hurt or losing their lives. And that's what happens when you are exclusive rather than inclusive, and that's why these laws are on the books. But retaliation and discrimination can happen from the police, from judges, from individuals, from companies, from the government in general. It can come from a lot of different facets. It's not really limited to any one particular segment in society. What you can do about it, there's a lot you can do about it. I think you're doing a lot to confront discrimination by holding these podcasts and running your organization. That's why it's been set up. So I think it starts with individuals like you and information as we're presenting today. It starts with individuals. Beyond that, you have the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU. That's a great resource. You can go onto their website, aclu.org, and they have a chock full of information about what you can do if you're discriminated against or a victim in any sense. There's other agencies, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the U.S. Justice Department. You mentioned Homeland Security, which is part of the Justice Department. The Attorney General's office in your own state, if you're a victim of discrimination. If you're pulled over by a police officer or feel that you've been discriminated against in a law enforcement capacity, you can file a complaint with Internal Affairs within the police department. Again, you can go to the state police. You can go to the Attorney General for that state, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have a case right here in East Haven.
Wait, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that's
the
FBI?
Right.
You're saying that the FBI cares about civil rights and the protection of civil rights for individuals, especially if like the violation comes from a law enforcer, like a police officer, or even in our court systems?
I'll tell you statistically what the FBI's four most researched and areas of work are right now in the civil rights area. Investigating hate crimes, color of law abuses by government officials, which is what you're talking about, alleged abuses by judges and other mayors and other public officials, human trafficking. That's a big problem around the world, and the FBI allocates a lot of resources to investigate human trafficking allegations, and slavery. Basically extorting undocumented workers who come to this country, spend a lot of money, and pay organizations to come here to work, and then threaten their families back home in their country of origin if they don't work, and they work for below minimum wages in very dangerous sweatshops. So these are the 4 areas that the FBI spends a lot of time and allocates a lot of resources working on. So it's my understanding of the Bureau is that they will and do take allegations of discrimination and especially hate speech very, very seriously.
Okay. It's just how, I mean, I'm sorry to get stuck on this, but you're telling me that they're going to take one person seriously? Like, let's say I'm the victim of discrimination in the court system. Let's say I am of a particular religion and I know that my judge dislikes that religion. And so my case, I would say, probably wasn't handled fairly. So I can go to the FBI and say that this judge discriminated against me because of my religion, or maybe I go to somewhere, I mean, where would I go, actually? If it happened in the courthouse, would I go to the higher court?
Well, I think where you would start is you would try to find a private attorney, and somebody that you trust in the community, preferably through a referral. Okay. Someone you can sit down, and you have every right that any U.S. citizen has, if you're undocumented or from outside the country, to sit down privately with an attorney in confidence and ask him or her to help you vindicate your allegations.
But what if you can't? I mean, I don't know the statistics, but I'm thinking that the majority of people cannot afford an attorney, especially the ones who are undocumented, let's say, but what if you can't afford an attorney? Like, is there any recourse that, they can do? I mean, can they just go to like the higher court or something, and would anybody listen?
Well, that's why you have organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union.
Okay.
They will provide you, if you have a legitimate case, they'll screen you, and they will provide you with legal assistance to help with your allegations.
Okay.
So there are avenues that don't cost anything, but I would start with a referral and a private attorney and go from there, and then branch out. But the FBI, if you do have merit in your allegations, the FBI takes hate speech and crimes against persons based on civil rights very seriously. And I think and they're not going to deport you, or they're going to look at the allegations seriously and then prosecute people if they violated your rights. Again, like we've seen in East Haven, there were a number of police officers that were allegedly. I don't know what the exact allegations are, but they were discriminating against persons of Latino origin and making it very difficult for them in the community.
Yeah,
and
I am familiar with that, yeah.
And it rose to the level where it got the attention of the federal government. Somebody filed a complaint, and now they're investigating, and these officers are going to have to stand trial for their behavior.
Okay.
And I think that's, to your question, that's the way it should happen. If there's legitimate allegations and there's merit to the civil rights violation, then they should be investigated, and the people that committed the alleged violations held accountable.
Okay. Our last question is, you mentioned that religion and national origin are also protected civil rights in the workplace. So I understand that sometimes people are discriminated against because of their religion, religious observances, and/or religious practices. And an example would be prayer. Sometimes when people file discrimination charges, they experience retaliation. Now, this also can tie into the previous question, like if you make an allegation against anyone, whether it be an employer, whether it be the law enforcement, whether it be the actual FBI themselves, or whatever, and there's retaliation. can you tell me exactly what is retaliation, and is it legal, and what can somebody do about that?
Well, I think to put it in context, especially against persons of Middle Eastern descent, after 9/11, there was a lot of animosity, a lot of anger, a lot of lashing out of people of Muslim faith, and because of 9/11. And again, when you stereotype a whole group of people, in this case, that are a billion strong in the class, for the deeds of a few, okay, you end up you're going down a path that's not healthy for our country. And we live in a country in which we encourage freedom and tolerate speech, and we encourage people to immigrate here and to get away from a lot of the persecution that they experienced in their countries of origin.
Right.
And these laws are put into place to address those behaviors. People that don't get it, don't want to play nice in the sandbox, and that are not inclusive, that don't accept different people that are different than them. I guess what you can do if you're at work, okay, what if in terms of religious accommodations, Title VII of the 1964 Act, Civil Rights Act, requires that an employer reasonably accommodate the religious practices of an employee or prospective employee, unless doing so would create an undue hardship. Okay, what are some examples of a reasonable accommodation for religious practices? Leave time for religious observance, a time and place to pray, the ability to wear religious garb. Again, as long as none of these religious practices infringe on or create an undue hardship for the employer, people should be allowed to work and practice their religion in a balanced and fair way. Mm-hmm. If they don't, or there's some, you can file a claim for discrimination with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the federal agency that handles discrimination in the workplace.
Does it cost any money to do that?
No,
okay.
It doesn't. If you hire a lawyer, as you suggested earlier, it can cost money unless you find a lawyer to do it pro bono or on a contingency basis, which there are lawyers that will do that. So that you can file in your state or federal agency, as the case may be, for discrimination. Now, if you file a claim for discrimination and the employer then terminates you for filing the claim, that's retaliation. You can file another claim for retaliation, which is very strong, and the EEOC takes retaliation claims very seriously, mm-hmm. like the FBI takes civil rights claims very seriously, mm-hmm. and they will investigate, hopefully hold the company or people that did it accountable.
But what if it's like the police station? Like, what if there's a corrupt police officer?
Right. And
so I go to somebody else and I complain about this police officer, and then I suddenly, I get a rock through my window. I mean, I'm not saying that's what they would do, but I'm just saying, it's an example of a form of retaliation.
Right.
So since it is the law that's doing the retaliation, I could still contact the same agencies?
No, that the EEOC deals strictly with employment civil rights. Okay, what you would do is exactly what was done in East Haven because of the allegations against the police with the discrimination against the Latino community, okay, which had been going on for a while, and there was a lot of complaints and a lot of evidence. So you would contact the Justice Department. Mm-hmm. Okay, you can go right onto the website. They have complaint forms, doesn't cost anything, and then they have reviewers that will look at the complaints, intake folks, see if there's merit. If there are, they send investigators out into the field. Okay, they may get a state involved as well if there are state law claims involved. And then, as they've done in East Haven, once they've investigated it, if there's merit to the to the allegations that the police were treating people differently because of their national origin, because of their religious practices, because of their race, what have you, any protected category, then the FBI will come in and arrest and serve warrants on the people that were engaged in the activity that was discriminatory. Mm-hmm.
So I guess one of the things that I'm hearing you say that I would like to stress is, it may start as one person filing the claim, and then other people come forward because they have a leader almost, like an advocator almost, like sometimes it's scary to be the first one to report like the harassment from a police officer or you know, harassment from your employer. But usually you're not the only person that this is happening to. I mean, just thinking.
Typically, probably not. I mean,
Yeah.
it could be, but typically, probably not.
Yeah.
Usually, discrimination happens on a wider basis to a class of people. If you're biased or prejudiced against, you know, a person, it's usually a stereotype against a whole class of people.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but typically, in my experience as a civil rights litigator, yes.
Okay.
But it is frightening. It is scary to have to come forward. You're afraid of, you know, a lot of folks that are undocumented go without justice because they're afraid of deportation. They're afraid of retaliation by people in their own communities. I don't have to tell you that. But it takes a lot of courage to come forward.
And also what I think a lot of people don't realize is that I mean, even beyond civil rights, as an undocumented or illegal victim of many different crimes, you have rights and protection actually under the government in some, you know, situations, which we will actually end up covering on another webcast, and I will also talk to the Department of Homeland Security about that too. But really, I just, it's very important if you're a victim of any kind of violation of civil rights or a victim of anything to come forward. It is scary, but there is protection for you. There are agencies. I'll list the agencies that Jeff mentioned during this webcast on the website and underneath the YouTube video, so everybody can go to those. And if you have any questions, you can email me. I did put your link to your website. Is it okay if people email you questions?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
That's what I'm here for. I'm a civil rights advocate, and proudly so. And we'll do my best to answer questions and continue to advocate.
Cool.
So
I'll list his email address under the YouTube video as well. So you'll have two emails to access. But I think that wraps up today's webcast, and the next one is going to be coming in a couple weeks, and somewhere between this one and the next webcast, which the next webcast will be focusing solely about our non-legal aliens. Is that how do you say it?
undocumented.
I'm sorry, undocumented residents of America, and their rights and protection that's available for them. So thank you very much, Jeff, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It was a lot of fun to do this webcast.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.